Hi fam, welcome back to Gringa Spanish. Today we're going to talk about ER and IR verbs. So last time we had a lot of material to cover, like what does conjugating mean, how does it work. So today I wanted to clarify one more thing before we continue on to the IR, ER verbs. And that is, what is the present tense and what do we use it for? Now that sounds like a really simple question, but I just wanted to clarify one thing. Present tense does not mean something that you are doing right now. It's used mostly for things that you do continually from time to time, an activity that you often partake in. And I know that that sounds like what, but it's pretty much the same as in English. When you're talking in English, you say, I go to Publix on Sunday. Like, I go to Publix on Sunday. That is the present tense. I am going to Publix right now is not the present tense. When you have the ing form of the verb, that is a different form. That's not the present tense. So I know that sounds weird because you would think present means you're doing it right now, but the ing is not the present tense. The present tense, like I said before, the easiest way to think of it is the exact same thing as English. I throw the ball. That's present tense. I swim in the pool. That's present tense. So it doesn't apply to something that you are going to say that you are in the middle of doing. However, we do tend to use the present tense most of the time when meeting people, when talking to each other, when saying things to people we don't know. For example, I go to the movie theaters, I say, I want to see this movie. I want. That's present tense. You could say I am wanting, but that's weird. It's the same thing in Spanish. You would say, I want to see this movie. I want to buy this ticket. Let's say you're meeting somebody. What do you like to do? I like, present tense. What kind of things do you do? I go biking. Go biking. I swim. I go to school. I study Spanish. So yeah, it's pretty much the same thing as English, so don't worry about it. If you would say the present tense in English, then you would say it in Spanish. It's not always like this, but luckily in this case it is. It's pretty easy to learn. Also, I wanted to clarify about regular and irregular verbs. We're just talking about regular ER and IR verbs right now, but some verbs can be regular in some tenses and irregular in other tenses. And some verbs can have like one version of them, in like the yo, tu, el, like one of those will be irregular, but the rest of them are regular. So you'll learn irregular verbs a lot by exposure. And also, as I mentioned before, the irregular verbs tend to be ones that sound really weird when you try to use the regular rules on them. So you'll develop a sense of those quicker than you think you will. Okay, let's move on. Let's start with ER verbs. So in ER verbs, in yo, the ER is going to change to an O. So for correr, the ER becomes O. Yo corro. Tú, the ER becomes ES. Tú corres. And él or usted, the ER becomes just E. You drop the R. Él corre. Usted corre. Nosotros, ER becomes EMOS. Nosotros corremos. For vosotros, the ER becomes E with an accent, IS. Vosotros corréis. For ellos or ustedes, the ER becomes EN. The R becomes an N. Ellos corren. I'm trying to say the spelling and the accents when needed so that y'all can listen in the car or on the bus without looking if you need to. Okay. Now let's go through two examples. Oh, I'm so sorry. I should have said correr means to run. Wow. Okay, let's go through two examples. Beber, that's a common ER verb. It means to drink. Yo bebo. I drink. Tú bebes. You drink. Él bebe. He drinks. Usted bebe. You drink, but polite. Nosotros bebemos. We drink. Vosotros bebéis. You all drink, informal. This one doesn't get used a lot. Ellos beben. They drink. Ustedes beben. You all drink. You're speaking to a group. This one gets used in the vast majority of countries and the vast majority of dialects. As I mentioned before, I'm kind of considering dropping the vosotros version from these grammar lessons because, like I keep mentioning, I live in Miami. It's a melting pot of all over the world. I have only heard somebody talk to me with vosotros once, and it completely threw me for a loop. I've been to South America, not everywhere, but I didn't hear it there either. I'm sure I'll have to look up. I think some countries, like maybe one country uses it a lot. I think it's Argentina. If I'm wrong, I know y'all gonna be upset, but I'm pretty sure Argentinians are one of the only ones, and I think Spain uses this, but nobody else does. I've never heard this. You never hear this. Like, alright. Okay, now let's talk about aprender. Aprender means to learn. Yo aprendo. I learn. Tú aprendes. You learn. Él aprende. He learns or she learns. Nosotros aprendemos. We learn. Vosotros aprendéis. You all learn. Ellos aprenden. They learn. Ustedes aprenden. You all learn. Okay. The reason we're going through these is because you're going to learn this by repetition, and I also want to give you some common verbs to recognize and practice saying. Okay, let's go through two sample examples in sentences. The first one is going to use the ER verb vender. That means to sell. Mi mamá vende pasteles en Publix. Mi mamá, that means my mom. There's an accent over the second A, so it's not mi mama, it's mi mamá. Mi mamá vende. So the verb is vender because you're talking about the third person, you're talking about somebody, it's who's not me, and it's not the person who's being talked to. It's the third person form. It's a single person who is not in the sentence, not partaking in the sentence, not speaking it or listening to it. Mi mamá vende. It becomes the third person form. The ER just becomes the E. Mi mamá vende pasteles, pastries, en Publix, at Publix. My mom sells pastries in Publix. One more time. Mi mamá vende pasteles en Publix. 2 is going to use the word creer. This is a useful one. It means to believe. And the present tense form of creer is completely regular to conjugate. I know it looks confusing because it has two E's in a row. It's C-R-E-E-R, but the present tense form is regular to conjugate. So let's read the sentence and then I'll break it down. ¿Tú crees que vamos a ganar? It's a question. So, tú crees, you believe. That's pretty useful. You can use that when you're arguing. You probably shouldn't state what somebody else believes when you're arguing, but y'all probably will. So, tú crees que, you believe that, vamos a ganar, that we will win. Vamos a ganar. Vamos means we will. A ganar. Ganar is an AR verb that means to win. Vamos a ganar means we will win. But here in the context of this question, ¿tú crees que vamos a ganar? Do you think we will win? So in Spanish, you usually form a question just with your voice. There are who, what, where, but this is a statement that has been turned into a question. In English, you would say, do you think we will win? But in Spanish, they don't really have, like, do you blah, blah, blah. You just turn it into a question with your voice by going up at the end. So, ¿tú crees que vamos a ganar? If the question marks weren't there, you would be saying, you think we're going to win. that could also be a sentence perfectly fine. You would just say it differently. But here with the question marks, it's said a little differently, going up at the end, the same way you would in English to create a question. ¿Tú crees que vamos a ganar? Do you think we're going to win? All right. Let's move on to IR verbs. So in IR verbs, for yo, the IR becomes an O. So you see now all the present tense, all the three types of verbs, the two letters just become an O for the yo version. That's the same for all of them. IR becomes an ES for tú. It becomes an E for él or usted. It becomes an IMOS for nosotros. It becomes an IS with an accent over the I for vosotros. And it becomes an EN for ellos or ustedes. So let's do an example with the verb escribir. That means to write. Yo escribo, I write. Tú escribes, you write. Él escribe, he writes. Usted escribe, you write, but polite. That's how I'm going to say it, I don't care. Nosotros escribimos, we write. Vosotros escribís, you all write. Ellos escriben, they write. Ustedes escriben, you all write. Okay, let's go through two common IR verbs. Vivir means to live. Yo vivo. Tú vives. Él vive. Nosotros vivimos. Vosotros vivís. Ellos viven. Ustedes viven. Decidir, that's another useful verb. It means to decide. Yo decido, I decide. Tú decides, you decide. Él decide, he decides. Usted decide, you decide. Nosotros decidimos, we decide. Vosotros decidís, you all decide. Ellos deciden, they decide. Ustedes deciden, you all decide. So you'll notice I mentioned before the vosotros version has an accent over the I. That changes the pronunciation of both of these words a little bit. Like vivís. You can hear that the end of the word is accented a little more than the front of the word. Vivís. Whereas when you say yo vivo, the front of the word sounds stronger, right? So whenever you have an accent in a word, that part of the word is accented. And you don't have to go overboard with it. You hear that it sounds pretty natural. Yo vivo. It feels right that way. Vosotros vivís. Same thing with decidir. Yo decido. Naturally, the CI here sounds stronger than the other words. Yo decido. But when you come over here, you have an accent over the I. Vosotros decidís. Okay, guys. Let's do two examples of IR verbs. Examples, ejemplos. Ejemplo means example. I'm teaching you guys. You guys are going to be great. Okay. Recibir. Recibir means to receive. It sounds similar to the way it sounds in English. So let's read the sentence. Nosotras recibimos flores después del show. Nosotras. Now, you know what nosotros means. Nosotros means we. But if you're in a group of all girls, you can say nosotras with an AS at the end. If there's 1,000 girls and there's one boy, it becomes nosotros with an O. The OS is the default version, but if it's all girls, you can use nosotras. Okay. Nosotras recibimos. The conjugation of the verb does not change. Whether it's boys or girls, it's conjugated the same. Recibimos. We receive. Flores. Flores means flowers. Después means after. Del show. Show, presentation, performance. Show is obviously an English word that crossed over to Spanish, but it's so common now that I really didn't feel the need to give you guys the formal version of that. You can say show. De el show becomes del show. So después means after. You would normally say después de, so after something, después de whatever. De is the connecting word after. It's not there in English. You would say in English you would just be after the show. But in Spanish you have to say después de and then whatever. And then it's not just show, it's el show. But when you have de followed by el, they run together. And this is correct. This is not slang. This is, you actually write it this way. De el becomes del. D-E-L. So, let's go through that again. You know all the words now. Nosotras recibimos flores después del show. We receive flowers after the show. Okay. The second example is going to use compartir. That means to share. Ellos comparten su apartamento. Ellos, they, comparten, they share. So the IR becomes an EN because we are talking about a group that is not involved in this conversation. So ellos comparten. The IR becomes an EN because this is the ellos version. Su means their. Apartamento means apartment, similar to English. They share their apartment. Ellos comparten su apartamento. Okay, guys. So the reason we usually teach ER and IR verbs together is that they are very, very similar. So before we go, I just wanted to point out to you, so you can remember easier, there's not that many differences between IR and ER verbs. AR verbs are different for all of these, but ER and IR verbs are actually the same for all of the forms except two, as you can see. They are completely the same in nosotros. I'm so sorry. The only places that they are different is the nosotros and the vosotros versions. So in the AR you saw that tu became AS, that L became A by itself. So in ER you saw that it became O, and then ES, and then E. And then for EOS it became EN. So for IR, if this is your first time, you were probably expecting that tu would become IS, and that L would become I, but that is not the case. For IR verbs in the present tense, it's the same as ER verbs, except for the nosotros and the vosotros versions. So for IR verbs also, tu becomes ES, L becomes E, and EOS becomes EN. This will become second nature to you. Okay. So let's just read through this list one more time with both of them so that you can go home with this in your mind. The takeaway spark notes. ER for yo becomes O. For tu, ER becomes ES. For L, ER becomes E. For usted, ER becomes E. For nosotros, ER becomes EMOS. For vosotros, ER becomes E with an accent, IS. For ellos, ER becomes EN. And for ustedes, ER becomes EN. For IR verbs in the present tense, IR changes to O for the yo version. In the tu version, IR changes to ES. For L, IR changes to E. For usted, IR changes to E. For nosotros, IR changes to IMOS. This is the only version that has the I in it. For IR, in vosotros, it changes to I with an accent, S. So the ER version becomes E with an accent, IS. The E has the accent. In the IR verbs, it's I with an accent and then S. This is the vosotros version. For ellos, IR becomes EN. For ustedes, IR becomes EN. Okay, guys, that was another long episode, but the grammar is super, super important. You can learn by exposure alone. You can learn by just watching TV. You can learn by listening to radio stories in Spanish or whatever, or trying to read the news in Spanish, or trying to read your favorite book in Spanish. And I recommend all of those things because exposure will definitely help you over time and increase your intuition for what you expect to hear and what you want to say in certain situations. But that being said, you will make your life a lot easier if you take the time to learn these rules. Now that you know these rules, all of those things are going to make a lot more sense. You're not going to be left guessing what version of the word it is, who's doing what when they're doing it. So the rules are going to make the job a lot easier for you, I think. And the best way to learn how to conjugate verbs is repetition, repetition, repetition. So remember that website I gave you guys in the first grammar episode, conjugation.org. That website is amazing. You just go to it, type in a Spanish verb, and it will conjugate it for you in every tense. And if there's any irregular versions of the verb, they'll be red bold, so you can easily see which versions of the verb are regular and which versions are irregular if that's the case. And then if the verb is regular for every tense, every person, then it's just black in regular text. So that website is super, super useful, conjugation.org. Alright guys, keep learning Spanish. See you next time.